I just love doing this. This is really so much fun to talk to people who are interested in our history. And I was speaking to my seatmate just now, and she agrees with me that we could be talking about many places in the world, but there's something about the North, something about the Yukon that it just encompasses so much. And that is why people like myself get so enthusiastic about talking about it. This plane depicted in that beautiful photograph was owned by my father, and he somehow got talked into buying 4 of those planes. They're called Wacos. That's very early. As you see, it's got double wings and a big Jacobs radial engine. And that tripod that is built there was erected to change the gear, the landing gear. I'm presuming it was on wheels, and it's being changed to skis in that photograph. But I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go through my notes that my father kept to verify that. But I wanted to tell you the story of how that Waco went down. And I was about 12 or 13 years of age and staying for the summer at our summer home at Dease Lake. And my father had the Waco there, and he had a passenger, a young man, about 20 years of age. And I don't know why he needed to fly from Dease Lake to Watson Lake. I don't know. That's gone from my memory. And I do know that he was a very nervous passenger, plane passenger. He was very nervous. And my father told me, please don't tell him any stories. For goodness sake, don't tell. He's had enough stories, and he's just shaking to get on that plane. Now, at Dease Lake at that time, and also the main thing is that those aircraft at that era did not have radios in them, no radio contact. But when my father had a passenger, he really liked to try his best to file a flight plan. And that was done at a Department of Transport facility 4.5 miles from the lake, up the road, up a little road. And Bonnie's duty, part of her duties as his right-hand man for gassing up the planes and changing the oil and stuff like that, if I had a flight plan to take care of, I had to run up that road to the DOT and then stand there while they did a Morse code flight plan to Watson Lake. Dalsiel was taken off in that Waco with 1 passenger, and he would arrive in 1 hour and 15 minutes, if I recall. I may be wrong about that time, but that's the way I was told to make it. So I spent very little time there, just enough to see him file the flight plan. And then I took my time walking back home. And when I was almost home, the DOT pickup truck, and it was a little tiny rattle trap thing, nothing fancy at all, came down the road behind me and stopped and said, "You better get in, there's some bad news." I said, "Well, I'm not getting in until you tell me what the bad news is." And he said, your father's plane did not make it to Watson Lake. It is down. I said, "Well, I'm not worried. He knows how to take care of this. He's done it before. It won't be his first going down in a Waco." And I wasn't the least bit worried. I honestly wasn't. And so we went down to the lake, and my mother had to be told, and then she was just a piece of work. She just completely dissolved and almost she had to get her family brought in to really look after her. She was in really bad shape. And I wandered around for 4 days and completely at ease with wondering what he was going through. And now I'm going to tell you from his standpoint what he went through. He was flying uneventfully he was about 5 to 7 minutes out of Watson Lake, his destination, when his engine cut cold. Silence. Luckily, he was at a height where he could see the best possible approach, which was a bunch of spruce trees or pine trees clustered in a certain way, and and by the way, his passenger was not amused. At this point, the passenger was screeching at the top of his voice, and my father said, "Shut up!" And glided into the top of these trees in such a way that the plane was essentially intact as it came onto the ground. And then my father said to this guy, "Shut up and get out. Open the door and get out." The guy was comatose. He was rigid with fear. He could not move. He couldn't even speak by that point. So my father had a serious problem because there was going to be smoke coming out of that engine, and he had to get move very, very fast. The lad was incapable. So he had to Dad had to jump to the ground, go around, and open the door and pry this young fellow out of his seat and get him away from the plane. And it did burst in flames. And he had the job of, his first thing that he would do would be to grab his emergency kit, an axe, and strip whatever fabric he could off the fuselage that will be used at night to protect you in some way. So that was his agenda. He had to move really fast. And this lad, when he put him maybe 30 feet away from the plane and set him down, he could not move. He could not move. He was just traumatized so badly. So the plane did burn, but it didn't explode. And then my dad realized, oh my God, what have I done? His hands, on the back of his hands, he didn't feel any pain at first. He didn't even know what he had done because he had this fabric wrapped around his hands, etc., and the emergency kit that he'd brought out. But when he looked, he was shocked to see nothing but bone. There was nothing, no skin covering at all on the backs of his hands. And he knew this was going to be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem if he were alone, but he had someone that had to be carried. He had to be carried out of there. And so he rigged up a method of this fellow. He got him upright behind him, and he grabbed a hold of his arms, and he started trying to drag him out. So the first day, he said, was absolutely horrendous. And then the pain started in his hands immediately that evening. The kid wouldn't take any water. He wouldn't follow any directions. He was impossible. And my dad would get him on his back and drag him as far as he could and then rest. And he would do that no matter what hour. It's August, so it was always a little bit of light. And the first day, the second day, the third day passed. On the fourth day, was about 5 to 7 miles from its destination, which means the Alaska Highway was very close, very, very close. But on the fourth day, an amazing thing happened. And my father was trudging this, and he heard a noise, and he looked up, and he saw in the distance, about 200 meters away, a man on horseback who put up his hand and said, "Halt!" And my dad dropped this guy from his shoulders, and he just went onto the ground. And this military man in full regalia had a whole team of horses and searchers on horseback that he was bringing from the Alaska Highway to save Dalsiel and the Waco and the passenger, right? And the plane had not been spotted to my father's. There was no planes flying over the would-be crash site. So this fellow says, "Halt." And then he said, in a very loud voice, so he could be heard, "Have you seen a plane crash?" And my father said, "Not today." And so the fellow said, "Thank you, sir." And he went in this direction, and the crowd of horses and horsemen deviated from this path and left this strange man carting something on his back in the wilderness with his hands all jumbled up with cloth and stuff like that. They didn't want any part of him, you know. And so off they went, and my father, luckily, was about it happened the same day. He managed to get to the Alaska Highway, flagged down a vehicle, put this young man in the vehicle, and said to them, "Get him to the medical unit at the Watson Lake Airport." And that's what happened to him. He just wanted him out of there as fast as possible. And then my father hitchhiked his own way to the house in Watson Lake, and then made a phone call to a doctor he knew very well in Edmonton, and said he would be on the next plane, and he had some very, very bad hands to show him. And luckily, I was very interested in medicine, and my father, by the way, had a strange job from the time he started to fly. He was very interested in medicine. He had been all of his life, and he took a test given by the government and was given the right to practice medicine in his aircraft in the north. And so he had a medical kit that you wouldn't believe. And if he had been able to get that kit out of the plane, it would have helped him at the time. He wasn't able. He was only able to get the foodstuffs, etc., out of the plane. But my father knew that this was going to probably end his career of flying or running an air service. And he was in Edmonton being cared for about 2 weeks, and there was a brand new drug that had just come out that his doctor wanted to try on his hands. So when he came home, he said, "Now, Bon, you're going to be in charge of this, and we have to do it twice a day." And it amounted to taking bandages off and then taking sterile tweezers and removing a mass created by the medicine. It was like a separate skin, and you needed to take it off very, very carefully, and then put more of the salve on, and then bandage again. And this had to be done for months and months and months. And he did not lose his hands. He didn't lose any use of them whatsoever. It was really an amazing recovery that he made. But that was one of the stories that I thought you would be interested in, because it includes footwork. And there was a lot of footwork. How much time do I have left? Where is our? A little more. Since we haven't covered skis, in our talks, and it is a form of transportation, and one of the best person to teach the youngsters of northern British Columbia and the Yukon was Father Mouche, and many of you know of Father Mouche, and he was very important in my life and in the lives of so many people, because he started his sojourn in Canada at Telegraph Creek. He was a very young man, I think early 20s when he came, and he taught us how to make very short skis, and ski down these very abrupt hillsides around Telegraph Creek. But I wanted to tell you about the time that he was really responsible in Bonnie changing her religion. I love to sing. I love to sing. And I went to the Anglican church. And I went to practice the Sunday choir practice. We were practicing for the Christmas concert. And I had a deep voice for a child. And I sang alto. And the Reverend Bird's wife was named Mary Bird. His name was Robin Bird. And Mary, truly. And she said, announced when we came for this, she said, Bonnie, you're not going to sing Silent Night. You'll have to be quiet because there's no alto part. I said, excuse me. But I can only sing alto. And what is the use of coming to choir practice if I can't sing? Perhaps I will go and talk to Father Mouche. And so I went and I knocked on the door of the Catholic Church. And I said, Father Mouche, would you allow me to sing alto in your choir if I joined your choir? He said, dear, really? I think I'll take it under consideration and let you know. Oh, thank you, I said. And then I walked away wondering, what is consideration? What does consideration mean he's going to do with me? Anyway, I spent a long time going home. I played and I, did all kinds of Bonnie things on the way home. And so I was at least 2 hours there. And I was approaching the log cabin to the porch, and I heard a lot of laughter coming from inside. And so I sneaked down underneath the window to get to the door. And I heard all this, oh my gosh, I heard Father Mouche laughing, and Reverend Bird, and Mary Bird, and my father, and my mother, everybody having a gay old time. So I pushed the door open, and everything stopped. Silence. And my father put his finger out like this, meaning, Bonnie, come over here closely. And I went close, and he said, now, what's all this about you singing in the Catholic choir? And I said, well, actually, Father Mouche said that he would take it under consideration. So, Father Mouche, have you made a decision? And, and that's how I changed my religion. So do you have any questions? I think that's enough for one day.